A slow process can fail without pain. When it does, nerves weaken quietly, memory dulls gradually, and balance changes before anyone calls it a deficiency. My name is Dr. Warren Hung. I'm a medical doctor, and on this channel we care health. My work is prevention and long-term function. I focus on the systems that quietly break down over years, not days. Vitamin B12 is one of those systems. Most people think taking B12 is simple. Swallow a pill, problem solved. That assumption is where trouble starts. To understand why B12 often doesn't work, you need a clear picture of how it is supposed to get into the body. Vitamin B12 is not absorbed like vitamin C or magnesium. It cannot just slip through the gut wall. It requires a handoff system, like passing a key through several locks in the correct order. The first lock is the stomach. When B12 comes from food, it is tightly bound to protein. Strong stomach acid is required to break B12 free. This acid step does not add B12, it only releases it so the process can continue. Once B12 is freed, a second helper appears. This helper is a protein made by special stomach cells. It is called intrinsic factor. That name sounds technical, so let me explain it simply. Intrinsic factor is a carrier. Without it, B12 has no way to reach the bloodstream. No carrier, no delivery. After B12 binds to intrinsic factor, the pair travels into the small intestine. Not the first part, not the middle. The final section. This area has specific receptors designed to recognize the B12 intrinsic factor pair. Only when the match is perfect does absorption happen. This is important. B12. Absorption is not passive. It is selective, it is limited, and it depends on multiple steps working together. There is also a backup route. A very small amount of B12, about 1%, can pass directly through the intestinal wall without intrinsic factor. This route is weak. It exists as a safety net, not a primary system. If everything is working well, this system is enough. The body stores B12 in the liver. Deficiency takes years to show up. That slow timeline is why problems are often missed. But this entire pathway depends on stomach acid, stomach cells, protein carriers, and intestinal receptors all functioning correctly. If even one step weakens, the system does not partially fail. It fails quietly and progressively. This is why taking B12 is not the same as absorbing B12, and it is why dose alone does not tell you whether it will work. Before we talk about pills, sprays, or injections, the mechanism must be clear. Otherwise, every recommendation sounds like opinion rather than physiology. But once aging begins to change the stomach itself, this system no longer follows the rules most people assume it does. The stomach is not a static organ. It changes slowly with age, and those changes affect B12 long before blood tests show a problem. After about age 60, many people produce less stomach acid. This is not a disease. It is a common biological shift. Acid-producing cells thin out. Signal strength between nerves and glands weakens. The stomach still works, but it works at a lower volume. This matters because stomach acid has one main job for B12. It separates B12 from food protein. If acid is weak, B12 stays stuck. The vitamin can be present in the meal, but unavailable for absorption. This is why older adults can eat enough B12 and still become deficient. The second change involves intrinsic factor. Remember, intrinsic factor is the carrier that escorts B12 to the absorption site. With aging, the cells that make intrinsic factor may decline in number or function. This does not always cause symptoms early. The stomach still digests food. Appetite may be normal. But B12 transport becomes unreliable. Medications add another layer. Many seniors take acid-suppressing drugs. These include proton pump inhibitors and H2 blockers. These drugs lower stomach acid on purpose. They can be appropriate and helpful. But they also reduce the release of B12 from food. This effect is well documented in long-term users and reflected in clinical guidelines. Metformin, commonly used for blood sugar control, affects B12 as well. It interferes with absorption in the small intestine. The mechanism is different, but the outcome is the same. Less B12 reaches the blood. None of this means these medications are bad. It means the rules of absorption change in people who use them. The intestine also changes with age. The receptors that recognize the B12 intrinsic factor pair become less efficient. Blood flow to the gut may be reduced. The timing of digestion slows. Each change alone is modest. Together, they reduce reliability. This is why older adults rely more heavily on the passive backup route I mentioned earlier, the 1% pathway. That route does not depend on acid or intrinsic factor. But because it is weak, it requires higher doses to matter. Here is the key point many people miss. The aging body does not fail at B12 absorption suddenly. It becomes inconsistent. Some days work better than others. Blood levels drift. Nerve tissue becomes undersupplied, even while labs appear acceptable. Large population data support this pattern. Surveys like NHANES show higher rates of low or borderline B12 status with increasing age, even in people meeting intake recommendations. Clinical guidelines from groups such as NICE and the American Academy of Neurology recognize malabsorption as a common cause in older adults. This explains why simply taking a B12 pill often disappoints seniors. The issue is not motivation, it is physiology. But once these age-related changes are in place, many common B12 habits stop working the way people expect. When people hear you're taking vitamin B12 wrong, they often assume it means the wrong brand or the wrong form. In clinical practice, the problem is usually more basic than that. The mistake is not intent. The mistake is mismatch between how B12 is taken and how the aging body absorbs it. I'm going to walk through the most common errors I see in older adults. I'll number them clearly and explain why each one fails from a physiological point of view. 1. Relying on standard oral tablets, despite impaired absorption. This is the most common issue. A standard B12 tablet assumes a working stomach. It assumes enough acid to release B12. It assumes enough intrinsic factor to carry it, and it assumes functioning intestinal receptors. In many seniors, one or more of these steps is already weakened. When that happens, most of the tablet passes through unused. The person is taking B12 regularly, yet very little reaches the blood. This does not mean tablets never work. It means they work only if the absorption system is intact. 2. Using doses that are too low to overcome absorption limits. Remember the backup route. About 1% of B12 can be absorbed passively, without intrinsic factor. Low-dose supplements, such as 25 or 50 micrograms, do not take advantage of this pathway. 1% of a small number is still a small number. In older adults with absorption issues, higher oral doses are often needed to make the passive route meaningful. This is not about megadosing for energy, it is about mathematics and transport capacity. 3. Assuming food-based B12 works the same as supplements. Food-based B12 is bound to protein. Supplemental B12 is free. That difference matters. Food requires strong stomach acid to release B12. Supplements do not. Seniors with low acid may absorb supplements better than food, even if they eat enough animal products. This is why a good diet does not guarantee adequate B12 status in later life. 4. Taking B12 alongside interfering medications. Timing matters more than people realize. Acid suppressants reduce release from food. Metformin interferes with intestinal uptake. Taking B12 at the same time as these medications can further reduce effectiveness. Spacing does not fix everything, but poor timing can make an already weak system weaker. 5. Trusting normal blood levels without context. This mistake is subtle and common. Standard blood tests measure circulating B12, not tissue delivery. Nerves and brain cells can be undersupplied while blood values still fall within reference ranges. This is why some people develop numbness, balance problems, or cognitive slowing before deficiency is flagged. Normal does not always mean sufficient. Here's the boundary that matters. Vitamin B12 can support nerve maintenance and blood cell production. It cannot reverse advanced nerve damage overnight. It works best when absorption problems are identified early and matched with the correct delivery method. But knowing the mistakes is only useful if we understand which forms of B12 can bypass these barriers. Once absorption changes with age, the form of B12 matters more than the label on the bottle. Different forms are not better or worse in general. They simply use different physical routes to reach the bloodstream. To understand this clearly, we'll go through the main forms one by one and match them to the barriers we discussed earlier. Standard oral tablets. This is the most common form and the least forgiving. Standard tablets rely almost entirely on the classic pathway: stomach acid, intrinsic factor, and intestinal receptors. If all three are working, tablets can be effective. If one step is weakened, results become unpredictable. In older adults with reduced acid or intrinsic factor, most of the tablet passes through unused. Increasing the dose can help somewhat by activating the passive 1% route, but this requires doses far higher than many people expect. This is why low-dose tablets often fail silently. High-dose oral B12. High-dose oral B12 uses a different logic. Instead of relying on the main absorption system, it overwhelms the backup route. If 1% is absorbed passively, 1% of a large dose becomes clinically meaningful. This approach is supported by clinical guidelines. NICE and other bodies recognize high-dose oral B12 as an option for people with malabsorption who cannot or do not wish to use injections. The limitation is consistency. Passive absorption is slow and variable. It works over time, not quickly. Sublingual B12. Sublingual tablets dissolve under the tongue. Many people assume this bypasses the gut entirely. In reality, most sublingual B12 is still swallowed with saliva and absorbed through the intestine. A small amount may cross the oral lining, but this is not the primary route. Studies comparing sublingual and oral B12 generally show similar blood level outcomes when doses are equivalent. The benefit is convenience, not a completely different pathway. Nasal sprays. Nasal B12 uses the lining of the nose as the entry point. This bypasses stomach acid and intrinsic factor entirely. For some seniors, this can be useful. Absorption depends on nasal mucosa health and proper technique. It avoids gut-related barriers, but introduces new variables. This form is often used when oral methods are unreliable and injections are not preferred. Injections. Injections deliver B12 directly into muscle. From there, it enters the bloodstream without using the digestive system at all. This is the most reliable method when absorption is severely impaired. It is why injections are standard in conditions like pernicious anemia. The limitation is practicality. Injections require access, scheduling, and monitoring. They are effective, but not always necessary for everyone. Here is the central principle. The best form of B12 is the one that matches the barrier present. Acid problems, intrinsic factor loss, medication effects, and intestinal changes each favor different routes. Choosing a form without understanding the barrier leads to frustration and false reassurance. But even with the right form, deficiency can still be missed if symptoms and testing are misunderstood. Vitamin B12 deficiency does not announce itself clearly. It creeps in through systems that decline quietly: nerves, balance, memory, and blood cell production. This is why many older adults live with low B12 for years without a diagnosis. Let's start with symptoms. Early signs are often vague: fatigue that does not improve with rest, tingling or numbness in the feet, subtle balance changes, slower thinking. These are easy to blame on age itself. Many people do. As deficiency progresses, nerves suffer. B12 is required to maintain the protective coating around nerves. When supply is low, that coating thins. Signals slow down. Sensation becomes unreliable. Walking may feel less stable. Fine motor tasks become harder. Cognitive changes can appear as well. Not dramatic memory loss at first. More often it is slowed processing, word-finding difficulty, or reduced attention. These changes are reversible early and much harder to reverse later. Blood changes come later than many people expect. B12 is needed to make healthy red blood cells. Severe deficiency can cause anemia, but nerve tissue often suffers before anemia develops. This is a key reason testing fails. Most screening relies on a single blood value, serum B12. This test measures how much B12 is circulating in the blood at that moment. It does not measure how much B12 is entering cells or supporting nerves. Reference ranges are wide. A result may be labeled normal while still being insufficient for nerve health in that individual. Clinical guidelines acknowledge this limitation. This is why functional deficiency exists. Functional deficiency means tissues are undersupplied even when blood values look acceptable. Additional tests can help clarify this. Methylmalonic acid and homocysteine rise when B12 dependent pathways slow down. These markers reflect cellular stress rather than circulating supply. NICE and neurological guidelines recognize their value when symptoms are present, but serum B12 is borderline. Large cohort data support this cautious approach. Studies from NHANES and the UK Biobank show higher rates of neurologic symptoms at B12 levels, traditionally considered low normal, particularly in older adults. This does not mean every symptom is caused by B12. It means B12 deficiency is often overlooked because testing is interpreted without context. The timing also matters. B12 deficiency develops slowly. The body's stores mask early decline. By the time symptoms appear, the process has often been underway for years. This is why waiting for severe anemia or dramatic lab abnormalities is a poor strategy in seniors. But once absorption, form, symptoms, and testing are understood together, B12 can be managed correctly over the long term. When you step back and connect everything we've covered, a clear pattern appears. Vitamin B12 problems in seniors are rarely about forgetting to take a supplement. They are about delivery failure over time. Absorption weakens, the stomach produces less acid, intrinsic factor becomes unreliable, medications interfere, the intestine becomes less efficient. None of this happens suddenly, and none of it feels dramatic at first. That is why the goal with B12 is not short-term symptom relief. The goal is long-term nerve and brain protection. This requires separating two ideas that are often mixed together. The first is symptom control. Taking B12 can improve energy, reduce tingling, or stabilize blood counts. These changes are helpful, but they do not tell the full story. The second is cause regulation. Cause regulation means making sure enough B12 consistently reaches nerve tissue and brain cells year after year. That depends on matching the delivery method to the absorption barrier that exists now, not the one that existed decades earlier. For some seniors, high-dose oral B12 is enough. For others, sublingual or nasal forms provide more reliable delivery. In people with severe malabsorption or autoimmune loss of intrinsic factor, injections are often necessary. None of these choices are about preference. They are about physics and physiology. Testing also needs to be interpreted with that long view. A single blood value is a snapshot. Nerve health is a timeline. When symptoms suggest deficiency, functional markers and clinical context matter more than whether a number falls just inside a reference range. There is another boundary that deserves emphasis. Vitamin B12 supports maintenance and repair only up to a point. Long-standing nerve damage may not fully reverse. This is not a failure of the vitamin. It reflects how long nerves were undersupplied before the problem was identified. That is why earlier correction matters more than aggressive correction later. On We Care Health, the approach is steady and preventive. Understand the system. Identify where it weakens with age. Adjust the delivery method. Monitor over time. Avoid both neglect and excess. If you are a senior taking B12 and not seeing the results you expected, that does not mean it is useless. It means the method may not match the barrier. My role as a physician is not to sell supplements or promise quick fixes. It is to help people understand their bodies well enough to protect function over years. If this explanation helped clarify how B12 actually works in aging bodies, you may want to stay with this channel. That's what we focus on here.